So, hello again and welcome to another pedalboard video. Yes, another pedalboard video. Pedalboard is never done, is it? You'll know these things. This one though is a bit different. It's all about MIDI on pedalboards. Yeah. So don't run away. And looking at a lot of other YouTube videos, I get the impression that people with pedalboards, which are mainly guitarists, which is why I've got the guitar here, tend to shy away from MIDI. They don't like it. Rather, think it's too complicated. It's not for them. It's a geeky thing that keyboardists do. So what I'm hopefully going to show you today is MIDI has a useful purpose in a pedalboard in some circumstances, and show you what I'm using it for on my current pedalboard setup. I'm not going to detail the pedalboard setup anymore. It's pretty obvious what it's doing from previous videos and looking at the pedals I have. So just for clarity, what I'm not going to discuss in this video is pedalboards like the Keith McMillan Soft Step and the Behringer FCB 1010. They tend to be for controlling laptops, computers really, computer software stuff. You might have guessed by now, I don't really like gigging with laptops. I prefer to deal with hardware. So this is purely a pedalboard video. All the pedals I'm showing you are from normal pedal companies. They're from Boss, they're from Pigtronics, they're from Strymon. So there's no computers involved here. They're normal pedals on a normal pedal board with normal patch cables between them. Just that there's also some MIDI cables between them as well, and I'll show you what they're doing. Just quickly show you what the pedalboard is doing here. So here we have the SY1000. What I'm going to show you also works fine with the GT1000 and probably other big multi-effect systems. So that's the main control board there. Inside the effects loop I have the other pedal board here, which has the looper, delay, reverb, harmonist there, and nice distortion pedal. These two pedals here are to do with the MIDI control, and I'll show you what those do in a moment. Okay. What I'm also controlling is this Electron Digitact, Digitact, depending on where you come from. That's being the drum machine. That's what I use with Glider Theory. With Helicopter Quartet, I use the Digitone, which is more a sequencer FM synth for ambient pad backgrounds. The same principles apply. I'm actually using the same system for both devices, which is quite nice. So, why MIDI? Well, if you know MIDI at all, you probably think of it as a thing keyboardists use to send notes to synthesizers. That's sort of the famous use of MIDI. I'm actually not using to send notes at all here. I'm not using MIDI notes at all. I'm using it for two main purposes. I'm using it for three main purposes. And a fanatical devotion to the Pope. I'm using it for two main purposes: control and synchronization. So control is basically for the Digitacts there, to control that on and off. Synchronization also for the Digitact, but also will synchronize the delay pedal and the looper and the reverb. So let me give a quick overview of the pedalboard. So the pedalboard is SY1000 there. Coming out of the pedalboard is this MIDI splitter here. So one end of that MIDI splitter goes to this pedalboard here. Actually goes to that, and the other half goes to the Digitact. So the first place it goes to in here is this switch, which allows me to switch the MIDI off. As you can see there, this light, maybe you can't see, this light goes off here. There's also a light on there that shows it. This is just an A-B MIDI switch, in fact. I've just got nothing connected to B, as you can see. It then goes into this thing here, which filters off any things I don't want. So that's basically filtering all the notes, all the control changes, all the program changes out. I'll show you what those mean in a minute. So that all I get into these is synchronization. So for controlling the Digitact, everything goes to Digitact. So I'm sending program change messages and control change messages to the Digitact, and it will respond to those how I tell it to, basically. Right, so let's get on to the meat of this thing, synchronization. Now, in the SY1000, it has an internal clock with a BPM. So if you look here, we've got a BPM, and it's reflected above the top here, 135 for this particular track. And inside here, you can synchronize various things. So the delay there is synchronized to crotchet, quarter note if you will. So all the delays, so whenever I change the BPM to, this will always match that BPM. So that will always be a crotchet delay. It'll go dong dong on the crotchets. Even if I change the BPM to 60, it'll just slow the whole thing down, so I don't need to change all my delays in here. The synchronization externally does the same here, so that means that this thing will also always be synchronized. Even if I tap tempo it, it goes back to the speed of that, of the SY1000. So that's always synced to there. Synchronized delays are really nice, just to make things nice and smooth, to make things match on the beat. Sometimes you don't want them synchronized, and that's what that switch is for, to switch it off. But synchronized delays are a really good thing, generally. And also, it means that you don't need to do the tap tempo dance on every device. When you change song that's got a different BPM, you just change it on here. This has the BPM encoded into the track, and everything is resynchronized. Just one button. I just change one button on there, everything changes to the new BPM. So if I don't want it synchronized, turn it off, and these things will free run, and I can change that tap tempo to be anything I like when it's slowly. The Big Sky is very good actually, because whether it responds to MIDI or not is encoded in the preset. So you can have presets that do respond to MIDI and some that don't. So actually, I don't need the disable foot switch in front of the Big Sky. It's just easier to have it that way because everything's wired in the same place. Synchronizing a looper is particularly useful because if you've got a drum machine, as I have here, and you're trying to synchronize your loops to it, that's nearly impossible to do without them being synchronized. So if I disable the MIDI to the looper and I start the drum machine and I try and play to it, this is without synchronization, and I'm pretty good with the looper. So as you can hear there, it quickly gets out of sync. I mean, even if you're really good on a looper, you can keep it going for maybe 3 bars, 4, but it drifts quite badly. Certainly over the course of a song, the chances of you keeping it in sync are very, very low. So this allows me to, if I put the sync back on again, and we start again, so there you go, perfectly synced, and that will sync all the way through a song, which is exactly what you want. So the synchronized looper is definitely a good thing. Of course, this loop has 2 loops there, and they can both be synchronized, obviously, with the clock. So the other thing you might have seen when I was doing that is the control part of it. So when I've got CTL2, that starts and stops the drum machine. So the MIDI clock has start and stop messages as well that get sent when you press the start and stop, so they do that. And you notice there that the stop will also stop the looper. So it's very powerful, the start and stop on here, and also that will also start the looper if there's a loop in the looper. So that's very powerful. You can start and stop everything all in one go, which is really nice. One problem I found is that the infinity looper will stop dead on a MIDI stop. Now that current preset on the infinity is set to fade, so if I play it normally and then press the stop button, as you can hear there, it fades, which is what I wanted it to do originally. But when I use the stop button, it stops dead, which is slightly annoying. My other looper, the Boss RC500, does what you'd expect. If you press the MIDI stop button, the loop will fade. So yeah, slight bug on the Pictronics there, which is irritating, but you can work with it. So the other thing this thing does is program changes. And program changes also save you a lot of effort. I'll show you here. So I've got here different patches on this Y1000, and as you can see on this Y1000, if I change the patch here, it also changes on the Digitact. You can see the untitled ones are ones that don't have a drum machine thing attached. And because this is on a foot pedal, foot switch, bank up, I've got set to patch up. If I do that, I can change the patch on both things with my feet. So I don't even need to kneel down. I'll sit to go down, bob down, change the patch, just go, thank you. So I can talk to the audience. Next song we're going to do this, push that, we're ready for the next song. And different drum pattern, different patch on the SY1000. Lovely. So that's really powerful. To do this, you need to do a bit of messing about inside the GT1000. I'll show you what I've done here. So if we go into patch MIDI, what I've got here is channel 1, which is that, program change 60, which is D12, and bank MSB, I leave it at 0. Now then, this is where things get complicated. This is why people like guitarists hate MIDI. Program change numbers are different per device. So the way the Digitact works is you take the D, that's the fourth patch, and you multiply that by 16, and then you add the 12. Some synths will use the bank MSB, some also use the bank LSB. It can get very complicated, but it's worth persevering and figuring out what it needs to give you that. Each patch on the SY1000 sends a different program change, so you don't need to put the same patch number on here. So if I go back to Dragon Boats here, patch MIDI, that's patch 61. So once you've got one, if you put them on incrementally, it's pretty easy. They all just match. They'll just go up one at a time. But you do have to play a bit of a dancing game with your machines to figure out what the patch numbers ought to be for any given time. Some of them can get very annoying. I think Moog synthesizers have a very strange system for doing it. Yeah, some of them are really easy, some of them are odd. So that's one of the things that gives MIDI a bad name, to be honest, but it does. Once you figured it out, it's not hard and you just get on with it. So the other thing I'm doing here with MIDI is control change, or continuous controllers, I think they're often called, or CCs. Now CCs send to a device and they can do an arbitrary things really. There are some standards for what they do, but they're not always adhered to, and different numbers do different things on different devices. So again, it's slightly annoying, and this is why people hate MIDI. But again, once you get figured out what they are, it's not too hard, and at least those are well documented what you need. I'm using the mutes on the Digitact here, so if I show you, I've got set here CTL1, unmute track 2. Yeah, so if I start, you can see there that enables and disables the snare drum on the Digitact, which is great because I can do all that from my feet. Don't need to bend down and play with the buttons on there at all. Now how you do that is you can set things on the, then you go into control again, assign settings, and I've got these here, MIDI CC there, source CTL1, it's a toggle because it's on off, and then you go right to the end here. I've got target MIDI CC, channel 2, which is voice 2 on the Digitact, CC94, which is documented as mutes, and flip them between 0 and 127, which is the maximum. So confusingly, 127 is muted and 0 is unmuted, so when it's 0 it will be displayed, which is, but you shouldn't get used to that. It's just a question of remembering which way around they go. And you can see here I've also got channel 1. This is to set them all off to make sure I don't have any accidents and leave them unmuted. So when I press CTL2, it will disable, it will always disable the things I don't need and make sure things are enabled. But those CCs can do almost anything you like. I'm only using it for mutes at the moment. But it's very, very useful for doing mutes. Because I have that on most of these tracks. It allows me to do all sorts of things. You could also put a program change in there if you wanted a different drum pattern to start in the middle of a song. I really should do that, to be honest. It makes things a lot more interesting, but I haven't quite got around to that yet, but it will do that too. So you can actually do program changes within the middle of a patch. Now that's also something I need to look into. But most of my patches have got these in. You can see there that one swaps over 2 and 5. So you've got basically the whole control, not whole control, but a large amount of control over a drum machine just from your feet. So you don't need to be digging down to do that. If you're a sat down guitarist, that makes it a lot easier, like Stuart is, where you can't even reach the pedals with anything but your feet during the middle of a gig. And if your back's a bit bad, you can stay in good posture all the time, which is nice. So other things other than the Digitact do respond to CCs. The Big Sky has a huge list of CCs it will respond to, as does the RC202. I'm not using those at all at the moment. There are two reasons for that. One, I'm not that bothered at the moment. And the other one is, it's hard to filter out different CCs for different devices. So I'm sending that to CC. If I didn't have that box there, that CC94 would go to all of these 3 devices, and it would have a different effect on each of those devices, and that's not what you want. So if you wanted to CC more than one device, you'd need some sort of proper routing and switching system that's a lot cleverer than what I have here. That little box is fairly clever, but it's not that clever. I did think of repurposing my Raspberry Pi software, which I mentioned some other time, probably ages ago. That does do that kind of thing, but it means converting things back into USB and then back out into 5-pin MIDI again, which I really can't be bothered with. But it's a possible future project if I decide I want more real control on these things. And eventually, to be fair, you run out of buttons on the SY1000, because obviously I want them to affect different effects on the system as well, because that's mainly what they're for. But I think the system I've got is nice and simple. It does the few things I need, and it does them really well, and it does them without me bending down during a gig, so I can talk to the audience, which I tend to do, and just engage with the gig rather than fiddling around with buttons and looking like a nerd. I am a nerd, but I don't like to look too much like one on stage. So that's a brief overview of MIDI on pedal boards. I hope this has been interesting to you. If you've got any other ideas, you think I think I'm doing something wrong, let me know in the comments. And if you've got any better ideas, also let me know. I'm quite interested to hear if anybody else has tried using MIDI in this sort of scenario for a pedal board, because I think there's a lot to be done here that's useful. It does need, I think, a big multi-effects at the heart of it, because you need something that's going to send different MIDI controls and MIDI starts and stops, and they tend to be the big multi-effect systems. You can get pedals that just do MIDI, as I said, there's the Behringer FCB1010, those sorts of things, and you can use those for controlling other effects and pedals. They don't have to go to a computer, or that tends to be mainly what they're used for. So yeah, there's quite a lot of possibility here for MIDI on pedal boards, I think, and something I will continue to explore. So hope you've enjoyed this. See you in the next one. Bye for now.